how did you come to write this? It's got a slightly Cassandra-ish title, if I may say so. We're still here, are we not?
Sure. For now. It's really the result of a lot of things. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming. It's the result of lots of things, one of which was a set of things that happened in 2015, which is the core of the book, which was when famously Angela Merkel on the last day of August announced that normal border procedures would no longer occur in Germany, and that effectively anyone who came in could come, anyone who tried could come. And I was covering a bit of this as a journalist. I was going to the reception islands, as they became known, the Italian and the Greek islands, and I was seeing the people coming in, straight off the boats.
Why? Was that a hobby? Or what were you doing that for? Was this with a view to writing the book?
No, first of all, it was just to write articles about it. And then
Right.
I thought, this is so strange because it seemed to me there was a speeding up of a process that had been going on for decades, but a speeding up to such a degree that if you saw it firsthand, you had different views from if you didn't see it firsthand. It was very easy on an island like Lampedusa, which is equidistant between the nearest Italian island of Sicily and the North African coastline. It's very easy to see people coming in, dream of these people being dispersed around Europe and so on. Then you go to, as I did, the towns and places these people end up in, speak to them when they're living outside the train station in Milan, or working for a gang in the marketplace in Rome, or in suburbs of Swedish towns. And I came to the conclusion that what we were doing was suicidal. And we were not asking any of the questions we should have been asking.
But hang on. You say suicidal. We'll come to that. At first, it sounds like you're motivated by compassion for the people who were coming here.
Yeah, I spoke to a very large number of people from all over the world.
Where largely were they from?
Well, as the EU now admits, the Frontex figures admit, most of them don't come from Syria. Most, by 2015, were coming from sub-Saharan Africa. But I spoke to people from Myanmar, from many people from Pakistan, a young man from Bangladesh who features in the book who had spent $15,000. His father's a bank manager in Bangladesh. He'd spent $15,000 to get to the Greek islands, where he was then trapped when I saw him, because they weren't allowing people off the islands then to Athens. It was very easy. This is the point, really, is that it was very easy in the media, in particular, and in government to some extent, to say, let them come. It's so easy at a distance. And yet we weren't asking any of the questions. And one of the questions I boiled it down to was this: can Europe be the home for anyone in the world who wants to move in and call it home? This is a very, very difficult question. And if the answer is no, as most people, I think, then the questions have to start from there. So who is it for? And is there a moment when it's too much?
Of course, the No Borders people would say that, yes, it can be a home for everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Even if the practicalities of that somewhat desert them and they don't get it. But nonetheless,
yes,
the moral imperative is that the border should be totally open. There are plenty on the left,
yes,
who would argue that, and indeed on the libertarian right.
Oh, yeah. Yes, there are a lot of people who argue that. And they are very rarely taken to task for the consequences of their view. Often they don't experience the consequences themselves. Although I give a set of examples in this of people in the open borders movement who actually did suffer the consequences. And there are some amazing stories of that, which I describe firsthand. But the crucial thing is, I say, in that 1 year alone, Germany added 2% to its population. Sweden in 2015 added 3% to its population. These are vast numbers to take in. And I know what people say. They say, well, you know, they'll move in, they'll become like us and so on. And of course some will, but a lot won't. And the question of speed and where people come from has to be thought about, certainly at a deeper issue and at a deeper level than at the level of, I want to feel good about myself, so I'll make somebody else do something generous on my behalf.
Well, indeed, on that particular issue, it's a little like those who argued a couple of years ago. And I remember having an argument with Simon Sharma about this on Question Time. which is that we must do more without actually spelling out what the more would be, and also encouraging more people to come here.
Yes.
And when it's pointed out that more people will die as a consequence of coming here, this is brushed aside.
Yes.
It's,
Yes, they always deny that there's a draw. They
Yeah.
always deny the draw. The NGOs deny it, others deny it. Since I wrote the book, well, there's a paperback coming out later in the year, but I mentioned that some of the NGOs have been caught doing something which I thought they were doing, which was cooperating with the smuggling gangs.
Yeah.
The Italian police and others discovered this just a couple of months ago.
because they follow the no borders
Yes. So,
ideology.
so what happens is, over the recent years that I describe in the book, the migrant gangs, which, it's disgusting what they do. It's just unbelievable. And the treatment of the people who pay the money to get them into Europe is just unimaginable to most of us. I spoke to somebody who was in one of the houses. They kept people in Libya, and he'd run out of money, and they tortured him and videoed it on his own mobile phone and sent it back to his family to get more money out of them. So these gangs are really wicked, and and it's a few $1,000s or euros to cross the Mediterranean. One of the things that people have to think about. The NGOs say that they are saving people from the Mediterranean. They were caught not only having contact with the gangs, the gangs would tell them when they were setting off a boat and where to pick it up, but then giving the boats back to the gangs. By 2016, the boats didn't have to go more than a few miles off the North African coastline because they were picked up by the European border agencies and by NGO vessels. So the smuggling gangs by then saved money on the petrol. They wouldn't even bother to fill the tanks up halfway, and they'd send out more and more unseaworthy vessels. On which, again, I mean, anyone who cares about the details of it, there were boats there was a boat I saw come in Lampedusa where there were a group of Eritreans who were sitting in the bottom of the boat, and they told me that they were in the hold of the boat downstairs. Those were the cheap seats, and they were the cheap seats because it was regarded that they had cheap lives. And if the boats went down, the slightly better off people from other bits of the world would possibly survive, but the Eritreans would go down. This is just unimaginable horror, and something which we have to, as I say, think about.
And at the time, of course, and still, people referring to these people as refugees.
Yes.
As if they were fleeing a war zone, when in the majority of cases they most certainly weren't.
Yes.
They were economic refugees. And if I remember rightly, one of the charities which was dealing with, an Islamic charity which was dealing with the people at Sangatte, went down there to Sangatte and immediately pulled its people out and said, there are no refugees.
Yes.
They are all economic migrants.
By 2016, Frans Timmermans, the Vice President of the European Commission, admitted that by Frontex's own figures, at least 60% of the people who came in 2015 had, quote, no more right to be in Europe than anyone else in the world. And here's the difficult bit, among others. I think we all recognize that there are people who are fleeing actual horrors, real horrors, like the Syrian civil war. And we have to have an attitude towards what we do with those people on a temporary basis, on a permanent basis, whatever it is. This country, by the way, I mean, we're the second biggest aid giver to the camps in Lebanon and Turkey and Jordan and so on. And
Italy.
Yes. And it costs 100 times more to house a migrant in, for instance, Sweden than it does to look after them in one of those places. So the economics for not saying...
But you're not, with respect, you're not looking after them in those camps.
No.
You're giving them a temporary place to stay.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not the same as having a new life, which is what they want.
Right, exactly. And the follow-on is this very strange game that is played by the Open Borders activists, which is, well, what's the difference between somebody fleeing socioeconomic hardship and somebody fleeing the Syrian civil war? I think a lot of difference myself.
Name it. Define it.
Well, so, one of the views I came to when writing this book was that if you believe in asylum, even the asylum issue has to be thought about more. Who is it that deserves asylum in Europe? I would say that it's people for whom only Europe could be the place that they could live, because outside of Europe they would surely die.
Why?
That is, well,
Why?
I give the example, for instance, of Yazidis. If you were a Yazidi in 2014, and the situation hadn't have been turned around slightly as it was, then I think Europe could have legitimately said, look, if there's nowhere in the Middle East for the Yazidis and they are going to be wiped out as a people because that is the aim of ISIS, then that is a legitimate asylum claim. But the idea that, I mean, as I say, now, as last year, as this year, as today, the movement into the Italian islands is entirely from sub-Saharan Africa. I don't doubt, believe me from speaking to a lot of people from there, I don't doubt for a moment that what they're fleeing is terrible. But can Europe become the home of people who are fleeing penury and low living standards there? I think it can't be. Or to put it another way, one point I make towards the end of the book is, what if the situation that we are in Europe is not that we are this endlessly open place where we can bring people in and we're like a sort of sausage machine, whatever you put in, it always tastes the same, people will come and they'll just end up being European by breathing the air of Europe. What if actually what it is that this is a kind of lifeboat itself, this continent of ours, and that we are in the situation of a lifeboat going through waters with people all around us asking to come onto the boat. And we want to bring people on board, and we can bring some people on board. The point is that it's not limitless, because there must be a point at which you capsize the only vessel you have. And this is very difficult, as we all know, because we don't have a thing.
We're a long way from that, aren't we?
Well, let's look at, some of the stats I give in the book for that, and some of the things I've seen across Europe. We're not that far away on some of it. Go to Paris. Okay, take a Parisian suburbs at the moment. Last year in Paris, I was there again after the book. There are people just living on the side of the roads in massive encampments.
Yeah.
In like the Stalingrad area. This is not the furthest away banlieue. This is not Saint-Denis even. These are, and of course, nobody cares about this bit. Just like they don't care about the towns across Scandinavian people. They don't go to them. It's worse than that. They laugh at the concerns of the people there. I was in DC until yesterday. I came back overnight. And I was reading the New York Times on the tube this morning. And I see that the New York Times has finally mentioned that the number of grenade attacks that are now happening in Stockholm. I remember even 18 months ago, and indeed when my book came out, the New York Times laughing at anyone who expressed concern about this. Oh, there are these weird people who think that there are suburbs of Stockholm that are unsafe. No, that's very serious. I've been to these places. I've seen it.
Well, and Malmo 10 times worse.
Malmo. People think it's some kind of far-right, alt-right, imaginary. No, 4 years ago in Malmo, locals had to do walk a Jew to work day.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. They were walking Jews, the remaining Jews in Malmo. It used to have a thriving population. You can see how thriving it used to be from the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery there. And it's got about 800 Jews there now. Locals were walking the Jews to synagogue to make sure they weren't attacked. Now, in what world does that become normal or able to be laughed at? Or worse, this thing of we won't even look at it. We won't even ask where it's coming from.
And yet a lot of the animus against the Jewish population of Malmo was sanctioned effectively by the Social Democratic Party leaders of the white Social Democratic Christian Party leaders.
Yes. By the way, there's a brilliant young Kurdish demographer whose work I cite quite a bit in the book, who is in Sweden, and his work alerted me to this extraordinary thing that it's now provable in Sweden that people's attitudes towards diversity, people are more in favour of the diversity after they have left a diverse area to move to a monocultural area.
Yes, indeed. Of course they are. Of course they are.
We will make America great again.